Thank you, and what a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having invited me, and what an honor to be here today. The Sweden Democrats, to us, feel often not just like a sister party, but also a little bit like an older brother. Because we are so alike, but at the same time, you guys are a little bit further in your development than we are. You have been in existence for a little bit longer, and I just read in the Dutch newspapers that you are at astonishing 29% in the polls today, which is incredible. Congratulations, wow. So, older brother, fighting for the old and free Sweden of yore, fighting against the new Sweden that decades and decades of social democrats have created in lieu of that old and free Sweden. You are the only ones fighting for that free Sweden, and you're brave enough to fight that battle. And to fight the downfall of Sweden, to fight against it, a downfall which even the politically correct media in the Netherlands are not ignoring anymore. We hear the news reports of what's happening in the neighborhoods in Malmö and the immigration situation in your country, and it's terrible to read about it, and it makes me even more proud to be here today to encourage you, because the fight you're fighting is necessary. And it's very, very important, and I hope you continue fighting it with even more success than you have today. As the Forum for Democracy, we know, just as much as you do, that if nothing changes, the situation will be just as dire in the Netherlands as it is in Sweden today, in a mere couple of years. Your party is not just ahead of us, your country seems to be ahead of us as well. We see, when we look at Sweden, we see a situation that we are trying to avoid happening in the Netherlands. Every couple of weeks, we are already hearing news reports in the Netherlands of groups of immigrant youth randomly beating up Dutch children. Attacks fueled by hatred against us, hatred towards what we represent. We have given these immigrants everything, and yet so many of them hate us for it. They view us as weak. We have become doormats. This demographic change is hollowing out our democracies. Because one cannot truly have a functioning democracy without the social cohesion that is embodied in the same shared national values. And if those national values are no longer shared by a significant part of the population, if your nation state gradually falls apart, your democracy falls apart as well. The fundamental idea underlying democracy is that political competition is a competition of ideas. But if you lose the sense of national cohesion, political competition inevitably becomes tribal instead of idea-based. It becomes a census, it becomes a battle for demographics. And that is a very dangerous trend that we are witnessing in every European country today. Meanwhile, the welfare state as we know it is being hollowed out due to these immigration trends. The overwhelming share of social security benefits are transferred to non-Dutch, and yet the socialist parties still do not understand you cannot have your cake and eat it. You cannot have mass immigration, open borders, and a welfare state at the same time. They are fundamentally incompatible. The established political parties in both Sweden and the Netherlands have misused the people's trusts and have betrayed us in the most fundamental of ways. They have sold out our countries. The unprecedented project of mass immigration has completely jeopardized our safety and our security on the streets, and our educational system, our villages are falling apart, and public safety can no longer be guaranteed in so many parts of our countries. Tolerance towards people of all ethnic and religious backgrounds has always been a core value of our civilization, and yet precisely that value is now under threat because of mass immigration. There are neighborhoods where Europeans are unwanted and unsafe. People of different sexual persuasions are no longer safe in our streets. The liberty of women is greatly endangered by the new trends that are a direct consequence of mass and uncontrolled immigration. And it is this demographic transition, this slow but sure siphoning away of our societies being identifiably Dutch or Swedish, that the elites of our age have brought upon ourselves. It is a transition, it is a willed transition that they're dreaming of. And it's not just this transition that they're furthering. It's not just a demographic and cultural transition. It's not just the siphoning away of our national identities that they are transitioning about. They're also transferring our sovereignty to Brussels, a process they perceive as a necessary and benevolent transition to an inevitable continental super-bureaucracy. They also wish to spend billions of euros and kroner on irrational climate policies, another transition. Indeed, transition, it is the fundamental idea in the mind of those currently holding power, from old to new, a further stage in history. It is the basis of their cultural Marxist mindset. They are furthering the necessary course of history. They want a transition, demographic transition, climate energy transition, a sovereignty transition, and also an architectural transition. We, as conservatives, know in our hearts that we are the heirs and defenders of what one can see in, for example, Stockholm's stunning Gamla Stan neighborhood. Every alley, every church, every house breathes the spirit of the West. It is our heritage. It is what we believe in. It encompasses what we descend from and what we want to defend. In the walls, we see inscriptions of those who centuries ago made an effort to create something, a church, a school, a house, something that will forever last. They aimed to pass it on, not just to us, but to our children and grandchildren. It is our duty to preserve it. Traditional architecture represents, in every respect, the opposite of the philosophy of transition, the opposite of the philosophy of the left. It is therefore no coincidence that our elites have done almost everything imaginable to destroy our ancient cities in Europe and to disfigure our skylines, to destroy the historical streets and the facades and the beautiful architecture that so characterizes European identity. Modern architecture is as much part of their political philosophy as is mass immigration, climate change, heresy, religion, quasi, whatever, and the European coup d'etat, the European power grab. We stand as much for national identity, sovereignty, rational energy policies, as we stand for Gamla-stan, the old canals of Amsterdam. We stand for the home and the sense of belonging that can be found in facades, in ornaments, the use of wood and brickstone. Our ideological enemy, on the other hand, stands for Novosibirsk, for the hyper-modern buildings of the European neighborhood in Brussels. They stand for alienation, for transition, for nowhere. We stand for somewhere, for home. Now, my view is that in Sweden, as much as in the Netherlands, the establishment parties have sort of simulated political conflict. They have pretended to think very differently from one another. The center-right in the past decades has, especially during election time, presented themselves as fundamentally different from the so-called center-left parties. And what we've seen in the past couple of years is that these differences, if any, are either empty election promises or so small as to exist only at 3 digits behind the comma. The center-right in practice has proven to carry out almost exactly the same policies as the center-left would have carried out, and vice versa. Just an example, a Swedish example, the supposed right-winger Fredrik Reinfeldt's pathetic call to the Swedish to open their hearts to refugees, or the Liberals and Centre Party happily supporting a left-wing government. The truth is, they don't really differ. Ideologically, they represent the same vision, the same fundamental view of transition. The center-right parties might want to establish it through a little bit more free market economics. The center-left might believe in higher taxes or income equality. But these are, in the larger scheme of things, marginal differences. Neither are serious about the problems of immigration, defending sovereignty, fighting the new environmentalist religion, and the climate clerics. So they may carry a different badge, a different brand, a different name, yet they carry out the same policies and equally contribute to the destruction of our nation states, our identities, and thereby our civilization. In the Netherlands, the ruling so-called Liberal Party has been carrying out the agenda of the Green Left for the past couple of years. They've opened our borders to unprecedented numbers of non-Western immigrants. They have signed a deal that will cost the Dutch taxpayers approximately 1,000 billion euros in the coming 20 to 25 years for climate things, and they've agreed to more transfers of sovereignty to the European Union. They are part of what one might call an ideological cartel. The mainstream parties are part of an ideological cartel that is in fact carrying out a radical, left-wing, cultural Marxist, transitionist agenda. And so it's time for a change, my friends. It's time that we stop apologizing. It's time that we are proud of what we represent, which is in fact a very mainstream, very sensible and very rational agenda. It is time to instill into our nations a renewed confidence, because the lack thereof really is the cause for our current crisis. We have been afraid to be proud of who we are and to defend our values and our wonderful civilization with a smile, as it were. Our ancestors built all of this beauty of the Western world. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are the inheritors of the spirit of Jerusalem, the spirit of Athens, the spirit of religion, the spirit of the gentleman. There's so much to be proud of. There's so much to defend. And it's so remarkable that in our universities today, in our newspapers, our television programs, all we are doing really is apologize for who we are. Isn't that remarkable? That the only civilization in the world today that has lifted so many people from poverty, has granted so many rights to so many people, is constantly apologizing for itself. It's my conviction that winning an election is not enough. Preferences of voters are like the tide of the sea. There will always be ebb and flow, high tide and low tide. We need to make sure that even if we lose an election, the sea will not wash away our achievements like a sandcastle on the beach. Only when we win the cultural debate, only if we deal with this sense of shame, this sense of having to apologize for everything, this sense of not being allowed to be proud of who we are, only if we deal with that, we are able fundamentally to change things for the better. This is also, if we think about it, how the left has succeeded in being so influential. They're not always in power, they're not always winning elections, but even if they have lost an election, the center-right parties are carrying out their agenda anyway, right? So my message is as follows. Politics is downstream from culture. And to break the left's stranglehold on our thinking, we have to win the cultural fight. We cannot just focus on winning elections every 4 years. We have to reconquer the institutions. We have to win the battle of ideas. We have to get our people in university positions, penetrate editorial boards of newspapers and television shows, start our own ones. We have to set up schools, build a network that is better organized than the international left, hand out architectural prizes, set up an alternative Nobel Peace Prize for that matter. A Nobel Peace Prize for the greatest climate skeptic of the year. We have to become not just political movements, my friends, but cultural movements. The key word here, in my view, is ecosystem. The left has built such a powerful ecosystem that their agenda is being furthered almost by any institution on the planet today. This means the work ahead of us is much tougher than we might like. Our task is not merely to build a ship, a party, and win an election, a naval battle. Our task is to build an entire fleet, to embark on the toughest, yet the most important journey the West has ever faced. A journey that must refertilize our lands, rebuild our cities, recapture our pride and identities. A journey of reawakening, a proper renaissance. We've done it before, haven't we? About 1500 years ago, we lost the incredible Roman Empire. And it took several hundreds of dark ages before we were able to find the roots of our civilization again and make them fertile again and make our continent flourish again. I think we can do it faster this time. And I think here in Sweden, we see the beginning of it. Thank you so much. Thank you.